Sustain267.
Welcome to the Sustain267 Podcast, where we look at issues affecting climate change in Botswana and the rest of Africa. I'm your host, Batlo Kilisitse. Today, we'll be looking at the planning of our living spaces and the impact it has on climate change and the opportunities for positive contribution towards the environment. It is worth noting that climate change has the potential to reverse some, if not all, developmental progress over time. An example is the coastal commercial capital of Nigeria that could be completely submerged in the ocean by the end of the century. Cities like Gaborone, the one I stay in, are large sources of emissions, but also highly vulnerable to consequences. According to a report, 70% of cities worldwide are already dealing with the effects of climate change. The good news, however, is that cities are also powerful agents of change. Urban planning has the potential to become a key factor in developing and implementing adaptive responses in urban systems. Although in the past it has had quite a clash with environmentalists, as development usually means creating concrete jungles. One of the most famous cases is when the Kenyan government tried to build a media complex in Uhuru Park, a beautifully green recreational park in the Nairobi CBD. Even in Botswana, as the Western Bypass is widened, we saw quite a number of trees felled. On the expansion of Gaborone, the capital city of Botswana, it was designed for 2,000 people over 60 years ago. We are now at more than 200,000 people, adding pressure to planning and visible evidence. It was planned based on the British 1947 system. It has since evolved, and the planning of Botswana was guided by the 1977 Town and Country Planning Act, which was reviewed in 2013 to be more responsive to emerging development challenges, accommodating plans at national, regional, and local levels. On making an allowance for the environment, there's an Environmental Assessment Act from 2011 that makes provision for environmental impact assessments to be used to assess the potential effects of development activities and to provide for matters incidental going forth. This week, I'm in conversation with urban and regional development specialist employed by the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development as a principal urban planner and based at the Lobata Town Council, where she's responsible for overseeing partnerships between the Town Council and international development organizations, civil societies, and academic institutions to drive Lobata's green growth strategy. With the world rapidly urbanizing and grappling with the urbanization challenges, she was one of the few African women urban planners sponsored by the World Bank in partnership with the government of Japan to pursue an MSc in international development with areas of expertise in climate change and development. She then went on to study planning for climate change in African cities. She's an advocate for the localization of the global development agenda and is currently initiating and piloting the mainstreaming of climate change mitigation adaptation at local level to build urban resilience. Ms.Gaokgakala Sobata, thank you so much for talking to me.
Morning, Mepato.
What are we currently doing in Botswana to accommodate environmental sustainability around planning? And I'm asking this question because clearly there's a lot of developments going on. I have a South African friend who says Botswana is one huge construction site. In light of all those developments, what are the provisions that we're making to accommodate environmental sustainability?
First and foremost, let me try to highlight on the role of planning. Urban planning is responsible for the spatial planning or spatial growth of cities and settlements. This is including our rural settlements in a sustainable manner, in a way that we would see it unifying the three sectors, that is social inclusive cities, environment sustainable and climate resilient cities, as well as economic and vibrant cities. The fourth aspect that is on top of them being urban governance. Urban governance is how you integrate all these three aspects that hold an urban space together to make sure that they link so that you minimize the trade-offs that we see currently happening. And as I've already indicated, the battle for sustainable development is won in cities, and it is dependent on how we plan our cities as planners. The way we plan our open spaces, the way we plan for the housing, it should be inclusive. The way we plan for development, we should ensure that they protect the environment and they are climate change conscious. The economic prosperity of our cities, we should plan them in such a way that when we map areas of production, that is our commercial nodes, and we establish the linkage, we facilitate the prosperity of the city. We also plan for the informal sector. When you ask me, what is our role in ensuring that our cities and settlements are environment conscious. Land is where we plan or where all our developments are taking place. And there are three variables that we integrate in this sense. The mitigation part, that is the actions that we take to reduce the adverse impacts of hazard and action taken to reduce concentration of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. We also have a role in doing that. The aspects of integrating climate change into our urban development is when we plan, we should ensure that we protect the urban biodiversity and its ecological assets. We have to ensure that we protect, conserve, and restore the ecosystem, the natural habitats. And how do we do that? We normally do what we call buffering. We normally protect the environmental sensitive parts. When we say the area along Sekgodisane River in Gaborone, you should maintain a certain distance away from the river. Buffering. We are doing it because we are not necessarily to restrict development, but to try to protect our communities and protecting the urban biodiversity. Because our cities are busy. That's where emissions happen. Should there be a flood due to climate-related disasters, like normally we see floods being the common pandemic, people should be safe from the overflowing rivers. And whatever activities that are taking part in the cities, when we buffer developments along the river, we try to protect whatever the living organisms are in there. Should it be farming, should it be use of chemicals, we want to maintain the barrier between such sensitive areas. Another thing is the nature-based solutions that are common when we plan. For example, our site planning. When we plan developments, there's what we call the plot orientation. Plot orientation in the sense that we want our buildings to be able to attract or use the natural light from the sun and reduce the use of electricity. And we want our buildings to be energy efficient. Another thing that we do is when we plan, there's the restoration of the ecosystem, maybe where you have to plant trees. You see, on many occasions, these developments that are happening, they are invading the natural space, they are destroying the natural habitat. So what we encourage when you develop, from a planning perspective, normally we encourage you to replant trees. When you submit your planning application, we would normally request to see how you intend to restore the trees that you might have destroyed when you do the change of land use. And we also encourage the reservation of open spaces. Unfortunately, in our cities and settlements, we don't have a robust plan for the greening of the open spaces. But the open spaces are the greening, the breathing space or the lungs of the city, because that's where we are supposed to plant more trees to ensure that all these carbon emissions from our transport system are being absorbed.
Actually, thank you for sharing what the open spaces are for, because there's one next to my house. I've never understood what it's for. Quite recently, a few weeks back, I was asking my mother if we should maybe go to the city council and ask to extend our yard. That's how much, on the open space, there's probably about 5 trees. But definitely now that I know what they're supposed to be for, I'll see how I can maybe throw in 1 tree towards the common cause.
Planning is here as a legislative to avoid urban sprawl. Like you have said, our city, for example, when we focus on Gaborone, you have said Gaborone is a city that was planned a long time back. But we see it urban sprawling. We see it developing in a way that we can say it is not environmental conscious. Because the way cities develop, we are supposed to promote what we call urban compact development to reduce the distances that people take to travel in their individual cars. These cars emitting more emissions to the environment. And another thing that we do is that, as we have already indicated, 67% or even 70% of the emissions are from our cities. What we do, we have to ensure that we plan for the integration or the use of other modes of transport. For example, cycling. Cycling has been and walking, they have been seen as the modes of transport that are environmental conscious, Of course, they don't have any emissions, but look at our cities, the way we have planned them. We are supposed to be working hand in hand with those who are building these roads to integrate cyclist path so that we reduce the use of individual motorized transport. Another thing that we have to do is in terms of transport planning, because transport planning is another element of urban planning. We should be having improved public transport to encourage the community to use this public transport and reduce the number of cars in our cities to give out emissions. Another thing that we do, issues of waste management. We also have a contribution to play that we reduce the amount of waste that goes into the landfills, because landfills are also greenhouse gas emitters.
And then you spoke of development and your role being to ensure that development respects the environment and protects the biodiversity. Have you faced resistance, let's say, with the people who are looking to develop and possibly people who are looking to invest, and they just feel like, listen, who needs biodiversity? We're saying we're bringing money, and you want to talk to us about biodiversity?
Yes, we have faced a lot of challenges, and we are even blamed or even being labeled as gatekeepers of development or being restrictive to development. Because when you try to integrate this environmental consciousness into your planning, now you are seen as being restricting development. Because we all know that economic development or capitalism is at the forefront, and it's even now not being conscious of the need to protect our environment. So on many occasions, we have seen ourselves where we have been clashing with the developers that we are too restrictive. If you are not environmental conscious, you would think like the planners are being difficult. They don't want developments within the town, or they are not conscious that land is scarce. But had we planned it enough, I don't think we would have experienced land shortage that we see today, because we are supposed to be promoting high-rise development so that there's balanced land requirements, where we find out that even the commercial sector is catered for.
You spoke mostly of new developments and making provisions for the environment and biodiversity with those. I was wondering if there are any plans for already existing spaces, because if you look at places like the main mall, which is essentially the old Gaborone Central Business District, it's mostly concrete. A lot of our buildings, this is me looking with my untrained eye, but being environmentally conscious. I would say they're not necessarily the most environmentally designed plans. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is there a way that we can improve past planning, if it even needs to be improved?
Let me not speak for Gaborone, because I'm not working for Gaborone City Council much. What you have observed is what the planning profession in Botswana has also observed. And I understand that they are even trying to redesign to try to avoid that much use of concrete. Because, concrete is also increasing what we call the heat island effect, the emission of heat. So I think Gaborone City Council, they are looking on to trying to reduce the concrete paving and try to come up with something. And what we have observed is right. We need to try to redesign our spaces to reduce the concrete pavement.
Now that you mentioned Lobatse, may we then move the conversation there? Please tell me a little bit more about Lobatse's green growth strategy.
At Lobatse Town Council, we have developed a strategy that we want to try to improve or encourage urban growth. Because when you look at the biodiversity or the ecosystem in Lobatse, we can still say it's undisturbed. And we want to ensure that the developments that we had are environmental conscious and are also climate smart developments. Another thing that we have done within our strategy is that for you to drive this strategy, because it has got different aspects, another aspect within the strategy is that we need to sensitize or make our communities aware of what is climate change, what is environmental management, because they go together. So we have tried to develop a training or an awareness training plan that we are going to sensitize Lobazet community on the need to reduce littering, to reduce production, and they also have to know what is climate change and how can they build their resilience. So within this community awareness raising, we want to ensure that our communities understand when disaster strikes, where should they report disaster that is climate related. Because we have areas which are located in sensitive areas like Piling. Piling is located in high hills, and during flooding, they are exposed. We have areas within Woodhall that are low-lying areas, and we have to make sure that our communities are well aware that should climate-related disaster strike, what should they do? So we want to teach them the need to reduce their consumption patterns, the need to reduce the waste that they give out, because we have been doing it. We have been trying to integrate waste recycling into our waste management practice. But we can manage it only if we involve the communities. If they know they have to separate their waste, they have to reduce their consumption patterns, they have to recycle. That way we can do it. One thing that I've realized and made me to come up with this initiative was that on many occasions when we talk of climate solutions, climate adaptations and everything, we talk at them at a higher level or national level, and then we are not bringing in our communities to understand what is it that we are talking about. Because for us to achieve all this, we have to start with community awareness or knowledge building or capacity building, like I've already indicated. We have observed is that poverty in Lobase is very high. We still have people who don't have access to electricity, and they are relying on the use of firewood. And guess what? We have a higher number of people now chopping wood or cutting trees for firewood to sell. And what does that mean? It means it's disturbing the urban biodiversity that we have. So we are also bringing on board to sensitize them on deforestation. And we also want to teach them to know the role that these trees are playing within the environment and within their lives. Not stopping there, it's not that we just want to teach them. We are also trying to develop solutions on how we can stop them from relying on that firewood, because they rely on firewood for their sustenance. So we have developed solutions to see how we can even give them access to clean energy, the use of solar, the use of biogas. And we want them to be the ones who will be leading the management or the running of this biogas production, so that they stop cutting this firewood, because some of them are doing it for sustenance. And we want to do the communal biogas plant where they can now do biogas and sell it to the community. And then those who don't have access to electricity for cooking, we are going to be getting something for them. We are also going to get renewable energy in terms of the use of solar light. There's an option that we can just maybe look for funds to connect them to the already existing national grid. But we realize that that would not be sustainable. Why not introduce clean energy? Why not introduce solar lighting? And we don't just bring the solar lighting to them. You just have to teach them, let them understand why you are not giving them the coal-generated electricity, but instead giving them a solar lighting. So it has to start with sensitization, community education.
Lobata Town Council is clearly fast becoming my Botswana town crush, the same way that Rwanda's like my country crush. Now I'm curious, it sounds like you have great plans. Definitely sounds like greater plans than I've come across or heard from other regions. Well, recently, the delegation of European Union to Botswana and SADC had launched 5 projects funded for approximately 10 million pula. And Lobata Town Council was one of the 5 recipients of the fund. And I know your proposal was aimed at climate change and environmental related activities. Firstly, kudos for taking the initiative and being self-starters to apply for that, because correct me if I'm wrong, you did it independently as a town council. Highlight on what your plans are for the grant that you've now received.
Let me highlight something before I answer your question. Funding for all these development plans, funding for all these initiatives is a challenge, because we might be having good ideas on paper, but for you to drive them, you need funding. So European Union has funded us to conduct this community awareness training, capacity building workshop on climate change mitigation and adaptation, and of course, environmental management. As I've indicated, they go together. They have funded us to also provide this access to clean energy that I have been talking about. And I can say that the money might not be enough, but this initiative or this drop in the ocean, I see it as a good start towards a bigger thing that we want to achieve as Lobatse Town Council. And I encourage maybe other institutions to come forth and see the role that local governments are playing, or city authorities or city councils are playing, and come forth to drive these initiatives with local authorities, because the direct partnerships can bear more results than when it's this vertical integration.
What role would you encourage councils to play? I think also given how well you are doing at Lobatse Town Council in terms of responding to, having environmentally conscious development.
Something that I can say to our city leaders or our local leaders is that if you remember very well, when the Sustainable Development Goals were conceived in 2015, the then Secretary General asked local authorities to be in the forefront and to ensure that these SDGs become a reality. So the sustainable development battle will be won in cities and settlements, as he said by then. And I'm urging them that local governments, we need to take or demand our space at the decision-making table. And we also have to lead this global development agenda, being the SDGs or the 2030 agenda, as they call it, the Paris Agreement on climate change, and the urban agenda. And I encourage local governments to come out and demand the decision-making space, and let's lead in the forefront. Let's try to build capacity at local level.
Beyond civil society organizations, what can citizens do? I'm big on citizen engagement, because I feel like nothing will work if we don't get buy-in from citizens. But then if as a citizen, my council is doing great work, and taking a lot of initiative, like the town council at Lobatse is doing, they're not necessarily up to date on what's going on in terms of climate change issues. What can I do as an individual to support, contribute, and encourage the work done by councils?
Councils are always open for partnerships, they're always open for dialogue. And I think because we have our city leaders being the mayor and the town clerk, for rural districts, we have our council secretaries and our council chairmen. I think if you want to maybe play a role as an individual, you engage those two and map a way forward. Like I've said, we are always open for partnerships. For example, here in Lobatse, we had the Climate Exploration Hub, who came to approach Lobatse Town Council, and our leaders agreed.
As we draw towards the end, so in Botswana currently, we are still on extreme social distancing. I think we're approaching day 50 of extreme social distancing due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And during this time, we have seen many changes in government and a lot of decisions being made in a very short space of time in regards to the COVID-19 response. What are the lessons that we can translate from the COVID-19 response to how we respond to environmental issues using urban planning?
COVID-19 is a pandemic or is a disaster, just like climate change. The way we treat these disasters, it should be the same. And I can say COVID-19 has taught us that everything is possible. It has also taught us that we need to transform the way we plan our cities and settlements. For example, we have to develop what they call urban data on mobility, For example, look at COVID-19. During COVID-19, public transport was suspended. And since the way our city was planned, it wasn't prepared to embrace the use of non-motorized transport. And use of non-motorized transport, for sure, it also reduces the chances of infection or getting COVID-19 from the public transport. But because our cities, the way we planned them, we didn't even plan for cyclist path. So it was very difficult to embrace these measures. So going forward, you see the need to integrate non-motorized transport. It would also curb the spread of COVID-19, but it would also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So the lessons that I've learned from now onwards is maybe we need to go back to the drawing table, starting from local level, national level, the civil society, and work together. And I've also realized how partnerships are very, very key, more especially with the private sector and the civil society. They have been very, very effective or very key in assisting the government in addressing COVID-19. So I guess even with climate change, if we partner with them, we can also defeat this battle.
If there's one thing that you'd like someone listening to this conversation to take away from it, what would it be?
These institutions at local level are very key in driving whatever agenda that you want. Even during COVID-19, we could see that if you engage them, if you teach them or you raise awareness, they can help you achieve anything that you want to do. So going forward, I'm interested in seeing local governments, not the ministry, but city councils and district councils, being allowed to be at the decision-making space, making decisions involving their community since they're very close to the community. And going forward, if we can transform the way we have been planning, if we can transform our institutions, I think we can go somewhere.
Okay, so taking up space by relevant voices for relevant solutions. Ms. Sobata, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
This week, we'll be introducing a brand new feature, African Bytes. In this features, we shall be having quick chats with Africans across the continent on climate change, their understanding of it, and how it affected them. To kick it off, I had a chat with a fellow Resilient 40 member.
Hi, what's your name, where are you from, and what do you do?
Okay, my name is Sikem Brice Nyuukonghi, and I'm from Cameroon. I'm a teacher and a climate activist.
To you, what is climate change?
It's generally considered as a rise in global temperatures.
Coming from Cameroon, what do you wish people knew about climate change?
It's good that people know what is driving this change, like what are the causes that are driving climate change, what are the actions that they themselves are taking, and actions from other parts of the world that really causes these temperatures to increase at a global level.
What are your efforts towards addressing climate change? I'm
directly involved in disaster management, that's prediction, and currently we are doing maps, drought and flood maps for some areas in Cameroon. So we develop maps that can help individuals or communities to better prepare for increase their emergency preparations, and then also develop targeted mitigation schemes based on the problems that we try to identify through our maps.
Thank you for taking time to listen to this week's episode of Sustain267. I'll be posting new episodes every week exploring climate change, sustainability, and development in Botswana. I was your host, Bytes, and the sound engineer was Maleho Makhoti. Like our Facebook page, Sustain267, share your thoughts, any feedback, and recommendations for topics you'd like to know more on. Let's stay safe and follow rules as per our government, so we'll do our bit to beat the COVID-19 pandemic. Take care.
Sustain267.